Commander Vexlor of the Krull Dominion adjusted his ceremonial armor as he entered the grand chamber of the Galactic Council. The chamber's massive dome sparkled with the light of 1,000 stars, each representing a member species of the Council. As the military attaché to the diplomatic corps, Vexlor's presence at such gatherings was largely ceremonial, a reminder of the Krull's physical dominance in the galaxy. The Krull were by any objective measure the apex species of known space, standing 3 meters tall with exoskeletons capable of withstanding small arms fire. They had evolved on a high-gravity death world where simply surviving to adulthood was considered a remarkable achievement. Their natural strength allowed them to tear through metal with their bare claws, and their reaction speed was 3 times that of the average sentient, which made it all the more perplexing that they weren't in charge. "Commander, your delegation is seated in Section 4, chirped a small avian protocol droid hovering at his elbow. Vexlor grunted in acknowledgement, his 4 eyes scanning the chamber for his assigned section. As he moved through the crowd, various species gave him a wide berth, the Jaluvians practically liquefying themselves to slide out of his path, the Manox delegation skittering sideways on their spindly legs, and even the bulky Grax moving aside despite their own impressive physiques. All except the humans. A group of them stood in his path, engaged in animated conversation, seemingly oblivious to the towering Krull warrior approaching. Vexlor cleared his throat sacs, a sound comparable to a garbage disposal chewing through concrete. One of the humans, a male with facial hair around the mouth area, turned casually. "Oh hey big guy, heading to your seat, we'll scoot over in just a sec." Vexlor froze. The casual dismissal would have been cause for ritual combat among his own kind. Yet here was this fragile creature, with no natural armor, laughable muscle density and dull flat teeth, treating him as if he were merely an inconvenience rather than an apex predator. "Ambassador Reynolds wanted me to ask if you're coming to the after party," continued the human, completely unaware of Vexlor's internal struggle. "He's got some of that fermented grain alcohol your species seems to enjoy. Though how you drink that stuff without a liver transplant is beyond me. I will consider the invitation." Vexlor managed, his voice a rumble of controlled aggression. Cool, it's in the Terra Suite level 42. Catch you later." The human gave a small wave and turned back to his companions, who had already shifted slightly to create a narrow path for Vexlor to pass through. As Vexlor made his way to his delegation, he couldn't help but notice that, as usual, the humans had secured seats at the very back of the chamber. It was a curious choice for a species that had, in just under 3 centuries of galactic participation, somehow managed to position themselves at the center of virtually every major political, economic, and cultural development in the known universe. The Krull delegation, like all the militarily powerful species, was seated near the front, allegedly a position of honor, though Vexlor had begun to suspect otherwise. "Commander, you appear troubled," noted Chief Diplomat Grazek as Vexlor took his seat. Grazek was old even by Krull standards, his exoskeleton bearing the patina of age and countless battle scars from his youth. "Did the humans offend your honor again?" "They always do," Vexlor grumbled. "Yet we do nothing. I do not understand why the Dominion continues to tolerate their insolence." Grazek's upper eyes blinked in amusement while his lower ones remained fixed on the council floor. Perhaps because the last 3 species that didn't tolerate human insolence found themselves suddenly without trading partners, strategic resources, or functional planetary defense systems. Vexlor shifted uncomfortably. The rapid decline of the Hexan Empire was still studied as a cautionary tale at the Krull War Academy. The Hexan had been almost as physically imposing as the Krull, with technology centuries more advanced than humanity's. Their attempt to put the humans in their place had ended with their economy in ruins, their colonies declaring independence, and their homeworld's defense grid mysteriously reprogrammed to broadcast human entertainment channels. No shots had been fired, no ships had been destroyed. The humans hadn't even officially acknowledged the conflict. They'd simply won, somehow. "The High Command has questions," Vexlor said quietly. "Questions about the humans, about their influence. It exceeds their military capabilities, their technological advancement, even their economic output. It doesn't make sense." Grazek's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "And you've been tasked with finding answers." "I've been offered an exchange position, 6 standard months in their diplomatic corps as a cultural liaison." The old diplomat's exoskeleton actually paled slightly. "You've accepted?" "It's not really an offer one refuses when it comes from the High Command." Grazek leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that still resembled grinding boulders. "Listen carefully, Vexlor. The humans, there's something about them, something we're missing. I've spent 60 cycles in galactic politics, and I've watched species rise and fall. But the humans? They're different. They don't conquer, they don't dominate, they just infiltrate. Like parasites, Vexlor suggested. No, more like water. They find every crack, every opening, and before you realize it, they're everywhere, reshaping everything around them without anyone quite noticing how it happened. Their conversation was interrupted as the council chamber lights dimmed and the central podium illuminated. The Galactic Council session was about to begin, with the day's agenda apparently focused on trade route regulations through the Orion Spur. As various species took turns droning on about hyperspace lane safety protocols and tariff adjustments, Vexlor noticed something peculiar. Every time a particularly contentious point was raised, numerous delegates would subtly glance toward the back of the chamber, toward the human delegation. Even more curious, the humans appeared to be paying minimal attention. Some were engaged in quiet side conversations, others tapping away at data devices, and one appeared to be actually napping. Yet somehow, whenever a critical vote was called, they were instantly alert and unified in their voting. They always sit at the back, Vexlor muttered, more to himself than to Grazek. The elder Kroll turned one eye toward him. The humans, in every council session, every diplomatic function, every galactic conference, they always take positions at the rear of the chambers. Why? It's not a position of honor or power. Grazek's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Perhaps you'll discover the answer during your assignment, Commander. I suspect it may be more significant than we realize. As the session continued, Vexlor found his gaze repeatedly drawn to the human delegation. By any rational measure, they should be insignificant. Their homeworld was unremarkable, their physical capabilities laughable, their technology borrowed or adapted from older species. Yet somehow, here they were quietly at the center of everything, while literally sitting at the periphery. The High Command was right, something didn't add up, and Commander Vexlor of the Krull Dominion was going to figure out what it was. Absolutely not. Vexlor stated firmly, his claws leaving slight indentations in the reinforced briefing table. I am a warrior of the Krull Dominion. I will not wear this. He gestured dismissively at the human diplomatic uniform laid out before him. Administrative Director Plex sighed, all four of her eyes blinking in exasperation. Commander, you've been assigned to the Human Diplomatic Corps as a cultural liaison. Their regulations require all diplomatic personnel to wear standardized attire. It has no armor, no tactical capability, no intimidation value, Vexlor growled. And it's beige. It's taupe according to the human cultural notes, Plex corrected, consulting her datapad. Apparently there's a difference, though our color perception doesn't quite capture the nuance. Vexlor's mandibles clicked in irritation. This assignment is beneath me. I should be leading battle groups, not playing dress-up with soft-skinned primates. These soft-skinned primates somehow negotiated exclusive mining rights to the Ceres asteroid belt from under the mandibles of the Hive Collective, Plex reminded him. The same Hive Collective that has never conceded territorial rights in its 9,000 cycle history. The High Command wants to know how. There was a moment of silence as Vexlor absorbed this. The Hive Collective was notorious for its absolute refusal to compromise on territorial matters. Yet somehow the humans had walked away with legal rights to one of the richest palladium sources in that sector. Fine, he eventually conceded. When do I depart? The human diplomatic vessel Cordial Intent docks in 6 hours. Pack light. Earth's gravity is only 1.2 standard units. You'll find it bouncy. The human ship was a disappointment. Vexlor had expected something impressive from a species with such mysterious influence. Perhaps a vessel of sleek advanced design or intimidating weaponry. Instead, the Cordial Intent resembled nothing so much as a flying hotel, with its rounded edges, abundant viewports and completely exposed bridge section. Welcome aboard, Commander, chirped a human female as he ducked through the airlock. I'm Captain Rivera, but please call me Elena. We're pretty informal on diplomatic runs. Vexlor straightened to his full height, his head nearly brushing the ceiling. Commander Vexlor, military attaché to the Diplomatic Corps, 7th Battle Group, Krull Dominion, he intoned formally. That's quite a title, Elena said, her smile unwavering. How about I call you Vex? We've got a 3-day jump to Earth, so we might as well get comfortable. I do not get comfortable during missions, Vexlor replied stiffly. Of course not, she agreed easily. Let me show you to your quarters. We've modified one of our cargo bays to Krull specifications, reinforced sleeping platform, atmosphere adjusted to your homeworld parameters, and gravity plating set to 2.3 standard. Despite himself, Vexlor was slightly impressed by the accommodation effort. Few species bothered to adjust for Kroll atmospheric preferences. The journey to Earth was uneventful, though perplexing. The human crew invited him to various recreational activities, something called movie night, a poker tournament, and most bizarrely, a karaoke session. He declined them all, preferring to spend his time studying human historical and cultural databases. What he found only deepened the mystery. Humans had nearly destroyed themselves multiple times through internal conflicts. Their technological development was remarkably uneven, achieving faster-than-light travel before solving basic resource distribution problems on their homeworld. Their physical capabilities were mediocre at best, yet somehow they had become disproportionately influential in galactic politics. Even more puzzling was their apparent lack of unified purpose. Unlike the Kroll Dominion or the Hive Collective, humans had thousands of competing governments, ideologies, and cultural factions. By all logic, such a fractured species should be easy to manipulate and control. So why weren't they? Earth orbit in 5 minutes, Commander, Elena announced through the comm system. You might want to come to the bridge for your first view. It's quite something. Reluctantly, Vexlor made his way to the ship's bridge. Several crew members nodded politely as he entered, seemingly unconcerned by the presence of a 3-meter-tall apex predator in their midst. Through the viewport, the blue-green sphere of Earth came into view. Not what you expected, Elena asked, noticing his four-eyed stare. It's ordinary, Vexlor admitted. I had thought perhaps your homeworld would hold some clue to your species' unusual galactic position. Elena laughed. Sorry to disappoint. Just a regular old Class 9 planet with too much water and not enough parking space. She pointed to a sprawling structure in orbit ahead of them. That's the Diplomatic Welcome Center. Your orientation starts there before you head to the surface. The Welcome Center proved to be as chaotic as it was enormous. Representatives from dozens of species hurried through its corridors, a cacophony of languages filling the air despite universal translator implants. Vexlor was processed through 6 different bureaucratic checkpoints, given 17 different information packets, 15 of which were digital, 2 inexplicably on processed tree pulp, and assigned a human orientation partner, named Greg. Greg was, to Vexlor's eyes, the most unremarkable human imaginable, average height, average build, with a facial structure so generic, seemed designed to be forgotten. So you're my Kroll, Greg exclaimed with inexplicable enthusiasm. Fantastic. I've never worked with your species before. This will be an excellent learning opportunity for both of us. I am not your Kroll, Vexlor corrected stiffly. I am Commander Vexlor of the 7th Battle Group, Kroll Dominion. Yes, I memorized your file. Greg nodded, completely unintimidated by Vexlor's tone. My job is to help you navigate human diplomatic culture for the next 6 months. First thing you should know, titles are respected but rarely used in daily interaction. It's nothing personal. Among the Kroll, everything is personal, Vexlor replied. Noted. Greg tapped something into his datapad. Second thing, we've got the Interspecies Diplomatic Conference starting next week on Earth. Perfect timing for your arrival. You'll get to see delegates from almost every major galactic power in one place. Vexlor's interest was immediately piqued. This conference, what is its purpose? Ostensibly, trade negotiations for the Outer Rim Development Project. Unofficially, Greg lowered his voice slightly. It's where the real decisions get made about who gets what in the next expansion wave. Your presence as a Kroll representative is actually quite significant. For the first time since his arrival, Vexlor felt a spark of genuine purpose. If humans were somehow manipulating galactic politics, such a conference would be the perfect opportunity to observe their methods. Where will the human delegation be seated at this conference? He asked, trying to sound casual. Greg looked surprised by the question. Where we always sit, I suppose. At the back. Why? Vexlor pressed. Why choose a position of lesser status? Greg's eyes crinkled with amusement. Is that what you think it is? A position of lesser status? He shook his head. Let me give you your first lesson in human diplomatic philosophy, Commander. The ones who choose to sit at the front are usually the ones with something to prove. Before Vexlor could pursue this cryptic statement further, Greg was already moving on, chattering about Earth customs, diplomatic protocols, and something called Casual Fridays, that apparently involved denim fabric and even less formal behavior than usual. As they proceeded through the orientation process, Vexlor found himself increasingly alert, searching for any clue that might reveal the human's secret advantage. So far, all he'd encountered was baffling informality, contradictory bureaucracy, and an inexplicable obsession with providing refreshments at every possible opportunity. If humans had some hidden power, they were concealing it exceptionally well beneath a veneer of utter ordinariness. The final orientation session ended with Greg handing Vexlor a small flat rectangle. "What is this?" Vexlor asked, examining the plastic card. "Your Earth diplomatic credential," Greg explained. "But more importantly, it's your coffee card. 10 stamps, and you get a free drink at any diplomatic corps cafeteria." Vexlor stared at him. "You're giving me a discount on stimulants." "Not just any stimulant," Greg corrected with surprising seriousness. "Coffee. Trust me, Commander, understand humanity's relationship with coffee, and you'll be halfway to understanding how we operate in this galaxy." As they boarded the shuttle that would take them to Earth's surface, Vexlor carefully tucked the card into his diplomatic pouch. Perhaps it was indeed a clue, the first piece in the puzzle of humanity's inexplicable galactic influence. Or perhaps the humans really were just bizarre enough to build interstellar policy around hot bean water. Either way, Commander Vexlor was determined to find out. The Geneva International Conference Center had been substantially modified to accommodate delegates from across the galaxy. Ceiling heights had been increased for taller species, specialized atmospheric bubbles installed for those who couldn't breathe Earth's oxygen mix, and gravity plates embedded in certain seating sections for delegates from high or low gravity worlds. Despite these accommodations, Vexlor felt distinctly uncomfortable as he followed Greg through the crowded main hall. It wasn't the physical environment that bothered him. The Kroll could adapt to far worse conditions, but rather the social dynamics. "Why is everyone staring at me?" he growled to Greg. Greg glanced around. "Well, first, you're a Krull. Not many of your kind join diplomatic missions. Second, you're wearing your ceremonial armor to what's essentially a business casual event." "This is standard Krull diplomatic attire," Vexlor insisted. "Sure, but it does have those skull trophies attached to the shoulder plates," Greg pointed out. "Most species find that a bit intense for trade negotiations." "They are not trophies," Vexlor corrected irritably. "They are ancestral reminders of the consequences of failed diplomacy." Greg's eyes widened slightly. "Right. That's actually worse, from a diplomatic messaging perspective." Before Vexlor could respond, they were approached by a tall willowy being with iridescent skin and eyes that seemed to shift color with each blink. "Gregory, darling," the being exclaimed. "It's been ages. Ambassador Lyriel," Greg greeted warmly. "May I present Commander Vexlor of the Krull Dominion." "Commander, this is Ambassador Lyriel, of the Elysian Collective." Vexlor inclined his head stiffly. The Elysians were known for their cultural achievements rather than military prowess, barely worth acknowledging in Krull diplomatic hierarchy. "A Krull diplomat. How absolutely fascinating," Lyriel trilled. "I've always said your species has such untapped potential beyond the battlefield." Vexlor bristled at what he perceived as condescension. "The Krull Dominion has 16 diplomatic academies and a negotiation success rate of 94%. When success is measured by how quickly the other party surrenders, I imagine the statistics are quite favorable," Lyriel replied with a tinkling laugh that somehow managed to be both melodious and deeply irritating. Greg cleared his throat. "Ambassador, I believe your delegation is seated in Section C. We should all probably find our places. The Secretary General will be opening proceedings soon." Of course. We're in the second row. Excellent visibility," Lyriel preened. "Where are you humans seated this time?" "The back again, I presume." "Tradition is tradition," Greg shrugged with a smile. As Lyriel glided away, Vexlor turned to Greg. "The Elysians get second-row seating. They contribute nothing to galactic security. They contribute approximately 62% of all entertainment media consumed in Council space," Greg countered. "Never underestimate the diplomatic value of having popular streaming services." The main conference hall was arranged in a semicircle of tiered seating facing a central podium. As Greg had predicted, the human delegation was positioned at the very back row, despite Earth being the host planet. The Krull delegation, conversely, had been assigned prominent positions in the third row, I am expected to sit with my delegation, Vexler noted as they paused at the entrance. Actually, for this conference, you're technically part of the Earth Diplomatic Corps, Greg explained. You'll be sitting with us in the human section. Vexler's mandibles clicked in surprise. That is irregular. It's the whole point of the Cultural Liaison program, Greg said. Complete immersion. Don't worry, we've installed a Krull-appropriate seat in our section. Reluctantly, Vexler followed Greg to the back of the hall. The human delegation area was notably different from the other species sections. While most delegations sat in formal rows with individual data terminals, the human area resembled something closer to a casual lounge. Delegates were arranged in a loose semicircle, some lounging on adjustable chairs, others standing in small conversational clusters. Commander, welcome, a distinguished human male, with silver-streaked hair approached. I'm Ambassador Julian Torres, Earth's Chief Diplomatic Officer. We're delighted to have you join our team. Vexler performed the formal Krull greeting gesture, pressing one claw against his chest plate. I am honored to serve as liaison between our people's ambassador. Julian, please, the ambassador insisted. We'll have time for formal introductions later. The opening ceremony is about to begin. As the lights dimmed, and the Secretary General of Earth approached the podium, Vexler took his seat, a reinforced platform designed to support his weight and exoskeleton. From this position at the back of the hall, he had a clear view of the entire assembly. The Secretary General's speech was predictably diplomatic, full of flowery language about cooperation, shared prosperity, and the bright future of galactic relations. As she spoke, Vexler observed the reactions of various delegations. The Minox representatives were taking meticulous notes. The Grax delegation sat stoically, their massive forms barely fitting in their designated space. The Elysians seemed more interested in being seen than in seeing, their iridescent skin catching the light with every small movement. Most curious, however, was the human delegation. Despite being positioned farthest from the podium, they appeared strangely attentive, not to the speaker, but to everything else. Vexler noticed how their eyes constantly scanned the room, how they occasionally exchanged subtle glances, and how several had small devices partially concealed in their hands. What are they doing? Vexler whispered to Greg. Who? Your fellow humans. They all have devices. Greg glanced around casually. Oh, that. Just keeping tabs. On what? Before Greg could answer, the Secretary General concluded her speech, and the conference's first session, focused on resource allocation in the Outer Rim, began in earnest. The debate quickly grew heated. The Minox conglomerate argued for prioritizing rare mineral extraction, while the Elysian Collective insisted on preserving worlds with unique biospheres. The Grax Federation demanded exclusive rights to certain planetary systems based on historical claims that the Hive Collective immediately disputed. Throughout the increasingly tense exchanges, Vexler noticed that the human delegates remained surprisingly uninvolved. They offered occasional comments, but proposed no bold initiatives, and made no strong demands despite Earth's significant interest in Outer Rim development. More interestingly, every time a particularly contentious point was raised, Vexler observed multiple delegates from various species subtly glancing toward the human section, as if seeking some unspoken guidance or reaction. Your delegation seems remarkably passive in these negotiations, Vexler noted to Greg during a brief recess. Greg smiled enigmatically. Do we? I hadn't noticed. The pattern continued through the afternoon sessions. Major powers staked their claims and argued their positions, occasionally reaching points of such tension that diplomatic translators struggled to maintain professional renderings of the increasingly hostile rhetoric. Just as the Minox representative accused the Elysian Collective of biological sentimentality at the expense of practical progress, a serious insult in Minox culture, Vexler felt a slight vibration from Greg's direction. The human checked a small device, then leaned over to whisper something to Ambassador Torres. Torres nodded slightly, then raised his hand to request speaking privileges. The Earth delegation would like to suggest a compromise, Torres stated calmly once recognized. The Parhelion system contains both the mineral deposits, the Minox seek, and the biological diversity the Elysians wish to preserve. We propose dividing the system, planets 1 through 3 to the Minox, 4 through 6 to the Elysians, with shared stewardship of the 7th planet, which possesses both resources. There was a moment of silence as both delegations considered this. This could be acceptable, the Minox representative finally allowed. We would require guarantees of minimal environmental impact on our planets, the Elysian ambassador countered. Of course, Torres agreed smoothly. Earth would be happy to provide independent monitoring of both resource extraction and conservation efforts. Just like that, a conflict that had seemed on the verge of diplomatic incident was resolved. What's more, Earth had somehow positioned itself as the neutral arbitrator, gaining monitoring access to a valuable star system without claiming any territories directly. Vexler's 4 eyes narrowed in suspicion. The humans hadn't just diffused the situation. They'd somehow engineered an outcome that benefited them while appearing to be completely selfless. The pattern repeated throughout the day. Conflicts would arise, tensions would escalate, and just at the critical moment, a human delegate would offer some seemingly reasonable compromise that inevitably left Earth in a subtly advantageous position. By the end of the day's sessions, Vexler was thoroughly perplexed. The humans were clearly implementing some kind of strategy, but he couldn't identify their methods or their ultimate objective. As delegates filed out of the conference hall toward the evening reception, Vexler noticed Ambassador Torres and several other human delegates huddled around a data terminal, expressions serious. "What's happening?" he asked Greg. "Oh, just reviewing the day's progress," Greg replied, though his tone suggested something more significant. Vexler was about to press further when the lights in the conference hall suddenly flickered. A moment later, they stabilized, but an electronic tone sounded from multiple devices carried by the human delegates. Greg checked his device, and his expression changed instantly. "Change of plans, Commander. We need to head back to diplomatic headquarters immediately." "Why? What's happened?" "Security concern," Greg replied, tersely. "Nothing to worry about, but protocol requires." He was interrupted by a deafening boom from somewhere outside the building. The floor shook, and several delegates cried out in alarm. "What was that?" Vexler demanded, instinctively shifting into a combat stance. Greg's face had gone pale. "That would be why we're implementing Protocol Theta 9. He turned to Torres. "Ambassador, the diplomatic corps building." "I know," Torres cut him off, his voice grim. "Everyone, emergency evacuation procedures, now." As chaos erupted in the conference hall, with delegates rushing toward exits and security personnel attempting to establish order, Vexler noticed something odd. While representatives from most species displayed panic or confusion, the human delegates moved with surprising coordination, quickly organizing themselves and assisting other species despite the apparent attack on their own diplomatic headquarters. More curious still was that none of them seemed shocked by the development, as if they had somehow anticipated this crisis. "Come with me," Greg instructed Vexler, his earlier casual demeanor replaced by focused efficiency. "Stay close." As they hurried through the crowd, Vexler realized that Greg was leading him not toward the main exits but to a service corridor at the rear of the hall. "Where are we going?" Vexler demanded. Greg glanced back, his expression unreadable. "To show you why humans always sit at the back, Commander." Greg moved with surprising speed for a species Vexler had always considered physically inferior. They hurried down the service corridor, passing confused maintenance workers and security personnel who, strangely, stepped aside when they saw Greg's diplomatic badge. "Emergency Protocol Theta 9, Greg would say at each checkpoint, and doors would immediately open for them. "What is happening?" Vexler demanded as they descended a stairwell that seemed to go much deeper than the building's official schematics should have allowed. "Your diplomatic headquarters has been attacked. Shouldn't we be assisting?" "The attack isn't the emergency," Greg replied cryptically. "It's what the attack is trying to cover up." They reached the bottom of the stairwell where a heavily reinforced door blocked their path. Greg placed his palm on a scanner, leaned forward for retinal verification, then spoke clearly. "Diplomatic Corps Officer Gregory Nakamura, authorization Sierra Echo Echo 426. The massive door slid open to reveal a cavernous room humming with activity. Dozens of humans sat at various workstations arranged in concentric circles around a central holographic display, showing a real-time map of the conference building and surrounding areas. Massive data screens covered the walls, displaying everything from security camera feeds to what appeared to be intercepted communications in various alien languages. Welcome to the Diplomatic Observation and Analysis Center, Greg announced, his earlier nervousness replaced by professional pride. Or as we like to call it, the back row. Vexlor stared in shock. What is this place? The real reason we always sit at the back, Commander, Greg said, gesturing at the enormous operation before them. You've been trying to figure out humanity's secret advantage in galactic politics. Well, here it is. We watch, we listen, we pay attention to everything. A stern-looking human female approached them briskly. Nakamura, what is he doing here? Theta 9 protocol explicitly prohibits non-human access to the facility. Director Chen, this is Commander Vexlor of the Krull Dominion, Greg explained. And Theta 9 subsection 43 allows for inclusion of allied species representatives when their security is directly implicated in the threat scenario. The director's eyes narrowed. And how exactly is the Krull Dominion implicated? Greg pointed to one of the large screens showing an intercepted message. Because according to that communication we just decoded, the Krull diplomatic contingent was the primary target of today's attack, not our headquarters. Vexlor's mandibles clicked in surprise. My delegation? Targeted? By whom? Director Chen sighed. By elements of your own military apparently. Come with me, both of you. She led them to a workstation where a human operator was analyzing a series of encrypted transmissions. We picked up these communications approximately 2 hours ago, Chen explained. They're using a variant of Krull military encryption, but with some modifications we hadn't seen before. It took our algorithms longer than usual to crack. The operator tapped several keys, and a translated message appeared on the screen. Operation Cleansing, Fire Authorized Target, Krull Diplomatic Corps Objective, Eliminate Potential Contamination from Human Influence Secondary. Objective, Create Diplomatic Incident, Implicating Minox Conglomerate. Authorization, High Command Security Division. Vexlor stared at the message, his exoskeleton paling slightly. This is impossible. The High Command would never authorize an attack on its own diplomatic corps. Not the entire High Command, Greg clarified. Just the Security Division. Our analysis suggests this is a rogue operation led by Admiral Krizak. The name hit Vexlor like a physical blow. Admiral Krizak, the most conservative member of the High Command, had always been vocal about his distrust of other species, particularly humans. But to authorize an attack on fellow Krull, how could you possibly know this? Vexlor demanded. These are internal Krull military communications. Even with advanced decryption, you shouldn't be able to attribute them to specific commanders. Greg and Director Chen exchanged glances. Should I tell him, or would you like to? Greg asked. Chen sighed. Commander Vexlor, what you're about to learn is classified at the highest level of Earth security. If you were anyone else, we'd be having this conversation after memory modification protocols. She gestured to the room around them. This facility is part of a global network we call the Backrow Initiative. For the past 127 years, humans have been systematically gathering intelligence on every species in the galactic community. Not through traditional espionage, though we do that too, but primarily through something much simpler. We pay attention. I don't understand, Vexlor said. Greg took over the explanation. When humans first joined the galactic community, we quickly realized we were outmatched in almost every way. Physically weaker than most species, technologically behind by centuries, politically inexperienced. We had nothing to offer except one thing. We're really good at noticing patterns. At diplomatic functions, trade negotiations, cultural exchanges, we sit at the back and we watch, Chen continued. We catalog micro-expressions across 342 different species. We analyze speech patterns, body language, pheromonal shifts. We correlate observable behavior with subsequent actions. Over decades, we've built prediction models for virtually every major political entity in the galaxy. Vexlor's 4 eyes blinked rapidly as he tried to process what he was hearing. You're saying humans have achieved their position through observation. Observation and analysis, Greg corrected. Every human diplomatic officer is trained to gather intelligence while appearing completely unremarkable. That data feeds into this system, which helps us anticipate virtually every major galactic development. But this is Vexlor struggled to find the right word. Invasive. Is it? Chen challenged. We don't use clandestine surveillance. We don't hack into secure systems. We simply pay attention to what happens in public forums more carefully than anyone else bothers to. We notice patterns that other species dismiss. Greg pointed to the intercepted message about the attack. For example, we noticed that Admiral Krizak's adjutant has a particular vocal stress pattern when transmitting orders he morally objects to. That pattern was present in this communication. The reason humans always sit at the back, Chen explained, is because it gives us the best vantage point to observe everyone else. While the Krull intimidate from the front row, and the Elysians preen for attention in the second, we quietly watch from behind, building the most comprehensive behavioral database in galactic history. A loud alarm suddenly blared through the facility. Several screens shifted to show exterior views of the conference center, where emergency vehicles were converging. Status report, Chen barked. Explosive device detonated in the east wing. An operator called back. Minimal casualties. Krull delegation safely evacuated to secure location Alpha. Evidence pointing to Minnock's involvement already being discovered by local authorities. Right on schedule, Chen muttered. Predictable to the second. She turned to Vexlor. Your Admiral Krizak is attempting to frame the Minnocks for an attack on your delegation. His goal is to provoke a military response from the Krull Dominion against the Minnocks, which would destabilize the entire Orion Spur, and allow for Krull military expansion under the guise of security operations. Vexlor's mandibles clicked in shock. How could you possibly know his strategic objective? Because he's tried variations of this plan 3 times in the past 8 years, Greg explained, pulling up historical data on a nearby screen, each time with slightly different tactics, but always the same strategic goal: manufactured conflict that justifies Krull expansion. We prevented the previous attempts through diplomatic maneuvering, Chen added. This time he's escalated to direct action. Vexlor felt as if the gravity plating had been increased tenfold. The implications were staggering. If what the humans claimed was true, then not only was a member of his own high command engaging in dishonorable tactics, but the humans had been aware of it all along. Why show me this? He finally asked. Why reveal your advantage? Greg and Chen exchanged glances again. Because we need your help, Greg admitted. Our standard playbook for this scenario would be to quietly provide evidence to moderate elements within the Krull government, allowing them to handle Krizak internally. But this attack changes things. It's too public, too provocative. If the situation escalates according to Krizak's plan, Chen continued, we project a 68% probability of major interspecies conflict within the next 30 days. The casualty projections are unacceptable. A nearby operator called out. Director, Krull fleet movements detected in the Proxima sector. 3 battle groups changing course toward Minnock space. Chen's expression darkened. It's already beginning. She turned to Vexlor, her voice deadly serious. Commander, you've been trying to uncover humanity's secret advantage in galactic politics. Now you know. We simply pay more attention than anyone else. The question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Vexlor stood frozen, his mind racing through the implications. His original mission had been to discover the source of human influence, and now he had. But in the process, he'd uncovered a plot that threatened not only galactic stability but the honor of the Krull Dominion itself. I need to contact the Dominion directly, he finally said. Not through standard diplomatic channels. I require secure direct communication with First Commander Drassakor, the moderate faction leader. Greg noted with approval. Good choice. Can you arrange this? Vexlor asked. Chen nodded. Of course we can. We've maintained secure back-channel communications with Drassakor's office for years. Vexlor's mandibles clicked in what might have been a bitter laugh. Of course you have. Is there anything you humans don't monitor? Reality television, Greg quipped. Even we have our limits. As they moved toward the communication station, alarms continued to sound throughout the facility. Screens showed escalating chaos at the conference center, news reports beginning to attribute the attack to Minnock's extremists, and Krull military vessels adjusting their courses across multiple sectors. You understand that by helping us you're technically committing treason against your military command structure, Greg pointed out quietly. I am committing to the true honor of the Krull Dominion, Vexlor corrected him. A Krull warrior does not attack from shadow. We do not frame others for our actions. If Krizak has forsaken these principles, then he is the traitor, not I. As they reached the communication station, Vexlor turned to Greg with all four eyes narrowed in thought. There's still something I don't understand. If your advantage is simply observation and analysis, why reveal it to me? This knowledge could potentially undermine human influence if widely known. Greg smiled enigmatically. Who would believe you? A lone Krull claiming that humanity's galactic influence comes from paying attention, that our secret weapon is just watching carefully and noticing patterns. It sounds absurd. Besides, Chen added, by the time you could convince anyone, we'd have already adapted our methods. The Backrow initiative is constantly evolving. A communications specialist signaled that the secure channel to First Commander Drozik's Corps was ready. Before stepping to the terminal, Vexlor gave the humans one final, evaluating look. You know, he said, in Krull military doctrine, we're taught that the most dangerous position on the battlefield is at the rear of the enemy formation, because that's where they place their most devastating weapons. Greg's smile widened. Exactly why we always sit at the back, Commander. Not because we're weak or unimportant, but because it's the perfect vantage point. Everyone's so busy trying to be seen from the front that they never consider who might be watching from behind. With that sobering thought, Vexlor turned to the communication terminal. It was time to save the Krull Dominion from itself, with the help of the most unexpectedly formidable species in the galaxy. First Commander Drozik's Corps, I swear by the sacred blades of Ancestor Vorkath, that what I'm telling you is truth, Vexlor insisted, his mandibles clicking with urgency. The secure holographic transmission showed Drozik's Corps' weathered exoskeleton and skeptical expression. Even through the encrypted channel, his authority was palpable. You expect me to believe that Admiral Krizak orchestrated an attack on our own diplomatic corps, based on intelligence provided by humans? Drozik's Corps' voice rumbled with doubt. Commander, have you considered that this might be human manipulation? I considered it immediately, Vexlor admitted. But I've seen their evidence. The communication patterns match Krizak's adjutant precisely, and the battle group movements could be routine exercises. Drozik's Corps cut in. Director Chen, standing just outside the transmission field, silently slid a data tablet to Vexlor. He glanced at it and continued without missing a beat. Battle Group 7 has just disabled its transponder beacons while on course for the Minox colony at Proxima 4. Battle Group 12 has requisitioned plasma torpedoes despite being scheduled for diplomatic escort duty, and Battle Group 3 has been placed under direct command of General Thrak, Krizak's most loyal subordinate. There was a long pause as Drozik's Corps processed this information. How could you possibly know about Thrak's reassignment? That order was issued less than one rotation ago. The humans know, Vexlor replied simply. First Commander, I did not believe it either, but they have been watching us, watching everyone, for decades. Their entire diplomatic strategy is built around observation and pattern recognition. Director Chen nodded approvingly from the sidelines. Drozik's Corps' expression hardened. Send me the evidence about Krizak, all of it. I will evaluate it personally. Greg, who had been monitoring communications at a nearby station, turned to Vexlor and gave a thumbs-up sign, apparently a human gesture of approval. Transmitting now, Vexlor confirmed as Chen authorized the secure data package. First Commander, we must act quickly. Krizak plans to provoke a full-scale conflict with the Minox. If he succeeds, if these accusations are verified, Drozik's Corps interrupted, I will handle Krizak. But Commander Vexlor, I must be clear, your position is precarious. Collaborating with humans against your own military command, regardless of justification, could be seen as treasonous. I serve the true honor of the Dominion, Vexlor maintained firmly, not the ambitions of one admiral. The transmission ended, leaving Vexlor standing rigidly before the now empty hologram projector. The humans around him had maintained a respectful silence during the exchange, but now the room erupted back into activity. Transmission analysis indicates 76% probability that Drozik's Corps believes the evidence, reported an analyst. Krull Battle Group 7 has changed course, called out another operator. They're heading back toward Dominion space. Good sign, Greg murmured. Drozik's Corps must have issued immediate countermanding orders. Director Chen approached Vexlor, her expression guarded. Your risk-taking was impressive, Commander. Not many would stand against their own military hierarchy based on evidence from a foreign power. Vexlor's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a cruel expression of irony. Not many would learn that their species has been unwittingly observed and analyzed for decades by physically inferior primates. Yet here we are, Chen replied coolly. Indeed, here we are. Vexlor turned to fully face her. What happens now, Director? Now that I know humanity's great secret, Chen's professional mask softened slightly. That depends largely on you, Commander. We didn't plan to reveal the Backrow Initiative to anyone outside our species. The attack forced our hand, and if I choose to reveal what I've learned to the galactic community. Greg joined them, smiling that infuriatingly casual human smile. As I said before, who would believe you? That humans have achieved their position through taking good notes. Besides, Chen added, the revelation wouldn't change much. Now that you know what to look for, you'll notice our observers everywhere. But knowing we're watching doesn't negate the advantage. By the time species start guarding their behavioral patterns around humans, we'll have developed new analysis methods. A communications officer approached urgently. Director, we have incoming transmission from Kroll High Command, authenticated at the highest level. Chen raised an eyebrow. That was faster than predicted. Put it through. The holographic projector flickered to life again, but instead of Drazik's Kor's face, it displayed the imposing figure of Grand Marshal Vornak, Supreme Commander of all Kroll military forces, and head of the High Command itself. Vexlor immediately snapped to attention, performing the highest form of Kroll military salute. Commander Vexlor, the Grand Marshal's voice resonated through the chamber. First Commander Drazik's Kor has shared troubling information with the High Command. Information that you provided. Yes, Grand Marshal, Vexlor confirmed, his voice steady despite his internal turmoil. Admiral Krizak has been detained pending investigation. His battle groups have been reassigned. The Grand Marshal's 4 eyes narrowed. The evidence against him appears conclusive. Vexlor felt a moment of vindication, quickly followed by concern about his own fate. Your actions require judgment, Commander, the Grand Marshal continued. You have collaborated with a foreign power against a superior officer. Yet if these allegations prove true, you have also prevented dishonorable actions that would have tainted the Dominion. The entire room had gone silent, humans and their technology alike seeming to hold their breath. For now you will continue your diplomatic assignment, the Grand Marshal declared finally. But with a modified objective, you will serve as the Dominion's official liaison to Earth's diplomatic corps, with direct reporting line to the High Command. Vexlor fought to keep his mandibles from clicking in surprise. May I ask the purpose of this assignment, Grand Marshal? The imposing figure leaned slightly closer to the transmission device. The humans have been watching us, Commander. Perhaps it is time we learn to watch them in return. With that the transmission ended, leaving a stunned silence in the back row facility. Director Chen was the first to recover. Well, that was unexpected. Our models gave only a 23% probability of the Grand Marshal taking direct interest. You underestimated Kroll adaptability, Vexlor noted, a hint of pride in his voice. Apparently so, Chen conceded. She turned to the room at large. Back to work, everyone. We still have a diplomatic crisis to manage. As the facility returned to its controlled chaos of monitoring and analysis, Greg approached Vexlor with an unusually serious expression. So, official liaison, that's going to be interesting. Indeed, Vexlor agreed. I suspect neither of us anticipated this outcome when we met at the Welcome Center. Greg shrugged. Actually, there was a 38% probability model that suggested something like this. Not my favorite scenario, to be honest. Why not? Because it means our relationship with the Kroll just got a lot more complicated. Greg glanced around the facility. This place works best when other species underestimate us. Now the Dominion will be looking much more carefully at human behavior. Vexlor's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. You preferred us as intimidating but oblivious opponents. It was simpler, Greg admitted. An alarm sounded from one of the monitoring stations. Both of them turned to see a flurry of activity around a central screen showing news feeds from across Earth. What's happening? Vexlor asked. The public narrative is developing, Greg explained. Watch. The screens showed various news sources reporting on the thwarted terrorist attack at the diplomatic conference. According to the emerging story, extremist elements had attempted to disrupt galactic peace talks,
but their plot had been uncovered through collaborative intelligence efforts between Earth and the Krull Dominion. That's not what happened, Vexlor observed.
No, but it's what needs to happen now, Director Chen said, rejoining them. The real story would create panic and diplomatic chaos. This version gives both our species a public relations victory while allowing us to quietly handle the actual culprits. Vexlor watched as the narrative unfolded across multiple platforms, expertly crafted to be both reassuring and slightly vague on specifics. Your species is manipulating galactic perception, he noted. We prefer managing the information ecosystem, Chen corrected. And before you judge too harshly, Commander, consider the alternative. Public revelation of Krizak's plot would humiliate the Krull Dominion and potentially destabilize your government. Is that outcome preferable? Vexlor had to admit it wasn't. Still, watching the humans so effortlessly shape the public understanding of events was unsettling. It made him wonder how many other historical events had been similarly managed. I'm beginning to understand why you revealed your methods to me, he said finally. You needed a Krull insider to legitimize your narrative. Partially, Greg acknowledged. But there's more to it. The Backrow Initiative has been predicting for years that eventually some species would discover our methods. Our models suggested that when that inevitable revelation occurred, it would be better to control the circumstances and limit the exposure to a single trustworthy individual. And you determined I was trustworthy. Chen smiled slightly. Our behavioral analysis gave you an 89% reliability score, uncommonly high for a Krull military officer. Your psychological profile suggested you value honor and truth above political expedience. Vexlor wasn't sure whether to be flattered or disturbed that human algorithms had dissected his character so thoroughly. What happens next? He asked. Next, Chen said, we finish managing this crisis. Then you and Officer Nakamura will continue your cultural exchange program, with some modifications to reflect your new status as official liaison. Greg grinned. Don't worry, Commander. I'll still make sure you get your coffee card punched. In the Backrow Initiative, Chen's expression became serious again. We'll continue its work, with one significant adaptation. We'll now be developing protocols for operating with the knowledge that at least one major galactic power is aware of our methods. An interesting challenge, Vexlor noted. We like challenges, Greg replied. They force us to evolve. As they prepared to leave the facility, Vexlor took one last look at the massive operation around them. Humans quietly monitoring and analyzing the behaviors of hundreds of species, predicting political developments, averting conflicts, and gently guiding galactic affairs from their unassuming position at the back of every room. It was, he had to admit, a brilliantly simple strategy. While the Krull intimidated from the front row and other species jockeyed for prestigious positions, humans had claimed the one vantage point that gave them sight of everything, and everyone had been too preoccupied with their own importance to notice. You know, Vexlor said as they entered the elevator that would return them to the surface, there's an ancient Krull military saying, watch the warrior who stands in the shadows rather than the light. Greg nodded. On Earth we have a similar expression, the quiet ones are the ones you need to watch. As the elevator doors closed, Vexlor reflected that perhaps humans and Krull had more in common than either species had realized. The difference was that the humans had been paying attention all along, while the rest of the galaxy had been too busy making noise to notice who was listening. Ambassador Vexlor stood before the Krull High Council, his carapace gleaming under the ceremonial lights. 6 months had passed since the revelation of humanity's Backrow Initiative, and the galaxy had been irrevocably transformed. Your report, Ambassador, Grand Marshal Vornak prompted, 4 eyes fixed intently on Vexlor. The human observation protocols have been fully integrated into our diplomatic corps, Vexlor stated. Our officers now maintain peripheral awareness training and pattern recognition algorithms based on the human model. Efficiency has increased by 43%. Murmurs rippled through the assembled council members. What had initially been received as an affront to Krull dignity, learning they had been studied like laboratory specimens, had rapidly evolved into grudging respect, then strategic adaptation, and the other species? Asked Chief Strategist Mekval. As predicted, the revelation has cascaded through galactic diplomatic channels, Vexlor replied. The Arcturians have established their own observation corps, the Minox Confederation has requested human advisors. Even the Junta have abandoned their traditional confrontational posturing, all because the weakest species in the galaxy revealed they had been taking notes, Vornak stated. mandibles clicking with what might have been amusement. In the Earth Embassy across the city, Director Chen reviewed the live feed of the Kroll Council session with Greg Nakamura. "They've adapted faster than our models predicted," Greg noted, sipping his coffee. Chen nodded. "The Kroll always were the most likely to embrace the methodology rather than resent it. Their warrior culture values effective tactics above pride." The revelation had been managed carefully. Rather than a galaxy-wide announcement, knowledge of the Backrow Initiative had been strategically released to specific powers in a controlled sequence designed by the initiative itself. Each disclosure was tailored to the species' psychological profile, ensuring minimal destabilization. "The Galactic Council convenes tomorrow," Greg said. "First session with the new seating arrangement." Chen smiled slightly. "Circular tables, no back row, symbolic but ineffective." Greg replied. "They still don't fully understand." Vexlor met with Elena Martinez, the newly appointed human ambassador to the Kroll Dominion, in the embassy garden. Above them the twin moons of the Kroll homeworld cast silver light over the carefully cultivated earth plants. "Your council session went well," Elena commented. "You were watching, of course," Vexlor noted without accusation. "Just as your analysts were monitoring our strategic planning session yesterday," she countered with a smile. The new equilibrium was strange but functional. Now that humanity's methods were known, other species had begun implementing their own observation protocols. What humans had perfected over millennia of evolution and centuries of diplomatic refinement, others were attempting to replicate through technology and training. "You never seemed concerned about being discovered," Vexlor observed. "Even now, with every major power attempting to replicate your methods." Elena's smile deepened. "Did you ever wonder why we revealed our true advantage to you specifically?" Director Chen claimed it was my reliability score and psychological profile. "Partially true," Elena admitted. "But there was another factor. Our long-term models indicated that the Kroll would be the most effective vector for controlled revelation." Understanding dawned on Vexlor. "You wanted to be discovered." "The Backrow Initiative always had a limited operational lifespan," Elena explained. "Eventually, pattern analysis would reveal our methods. By controlling the circumstances of discovery, we shaped the response. You manipulated my species into becoming the ambassadors of your methodology," Vexlor realized, mandibles clicking rapidly. "We prefer strategic partnership," Elena corrected. "The Kroll command respect that humans never could. When you adopted our methods, others followed who would have dismissed them coming directly from us." The next day, representatives from 17 species gathered around the Galactic Council's new circular table. The symbolic gesture had been the Arcturian Chancellor's idea, a physical representation of the new era of transparent diplomacy. Vexlor took his assigned seat between the Genta delegate and the Minox representative. Across the table, Greg Nakamura sat beside Ambassador Martinez, both appearing perfectly comfortable with the arrangement. "This council is called to order," announced the Arcturian Chancellor. "Today we finalize the Galactic Observation Protocols, ensuring all member species have equal access to behavioral analysis training and technology." As discussions proceeded, Vexlor noticed something peculiar. While every other species representatives were actively engaged in the central conversation, the humans frequently glanced at their data tablets. Occasionally they would whisper to each other or make subtle gestures toward the room's corners. During a recess, Vexlor approached Greg. "You're still watching the periphery," he observed quietly. Greg smiled. "Old habits." "There's something more," Vexlor insisted. "The circular table should have neutralized your advantage, yet you seem unconcerned." Greg glanced around, then leaned closer. "The Backrow Initiative was never about physical position, Commander. It was about perspective. While everyone focuses on the center, the obvious power, the loudest voice, we pay attention to everything else. But now everyone knows to do the same." Greg's smile widened. "Do they?" "Look around." Vexlor surveyed the chamber. Despite the new protocols and shared methodology, every other species' representatives remained clustered in intense conversations, focusing entirely on their immediate interactions. None maintained the constant environmental awareness that seemed second nature to the humans. "They're using our methods but missing the fundamental principle," Vexlor realized. "Exactly,
They've adopted the tactics without understanding the mindset. They're still thinking like predators, focusing intensely on one target. We think like prey animals who survived by noticing everything at once. Elena approached, nodding politely to Vexlor. The Chancellor is reconvening the session. As they returned to their seats, Vexlor noticed subtle human staff members positioned throughout the chamber, at refreshment stations, by communication terminals, near environmental controls. None held official diplomatic titles, yet all had perfect vantage points to observe the entire proceedings. You've turned sitting at the back into a metaphor, Vexlor murmured to Greg as they sat down. We never needed the back row, Greg confirmed quietly. That was just where it was easiest to see everything without being noticed. But now that everyone's watching us, you've positioned yourselves everywhere, Vexlor finished. The session resumed with detailed discussions of information sharing protocols and behavioral analysis standardization. Every species seemed satisfied with the new arrangement, equal access to what had previously been humanity's exclusive advantage. Only Vexlor understood the irony. In their rush to adopt human observational methods, the galaxy's powers had focused entirely on the technique, missing the evolutionary mindset that made it effective. They had learned to sit at the back without understanding why humans did so. As the final protocols were ratified, Ambassador Martinez caught Vexlor across the table and gave him a slight nod, acknowledgement between the only two beings in the room who understood the truth. The circular table had eliminated the back row, but it didn't matter. Humans had simply adapted, as they always did. While the galaxy's most powerful species congratulated themselves on achieving parity with humanity, the humans had already moved beyond position to perspective. The galaxy had learned to watch like humans, but still didn't know how to see.